Afternoon, Year 6, and welcome to the much anticipated part 2 of Chapter 9, The Night Visitors. At 1:30 in the morning, Alex's eyes blinked open and he was instantly awake. He slipped out of bed and dressed quickly in his darkest clothes, then left the room. He was half surprised that the door was unlocked and the corridor seemed unmonitored. But this was, after all, Sale's private house, and any security would have been designed to stop people coming in, not leaving. Sale had warned him not to leave the house, but the voices behind the metal door had spoken of something arriving at 2 o'clock. Alex had to know what it was. He found his way into the kitchen and tiptoed past a stretch of gleaming silver surfaces and an oversized American fridge. Let sleeping dogs lie, he thought to himself, remembering what he was being served for tomorrow's dinner. There was a side door, fortunately, with a key still in the lock. Alex turned it and let himself out. At a last-minute precaution, he locked the door and kept the key. Now at least he had a way back in. It was a soft grey night with a half moon forming a perfect D in the sky. D for what? Alex wondered. Danger, discovery, disaster. Only time would tell. He took 2 steps forward, then froze as a searchlight rolled past. Centimetres away, directed from a tower he hadn't even seen. At the same time, he became aware of voices, and 2 guards walked slowly across the garden, patrolling the back of the house. They were both armed, and Alex remembered what Sale had said. An accidental shooting would save him £4,000. And given the importance of the Stormbreakers, would anyone care just how accidental the shooting might have been? He waited until the men had gone, then took the opposite direction, running along the side of the house, ducking under windows. He reached the corner and looked round. In the distance, the airstrip was lit up, and there were figures, more guards and technicians, everywhere. One man he recognised walking past the fountain towards a waiting truck. He was tall and gangly, silhouetted against the lights, a black cutout. But Alex would have known Mr. Green anywhere. They come tonight at 0200 hours, night visitors, and Mr. Green was on his way to meet them. The butler had almost reached the truck, and Alex knew that if he waited any longer, he would be too late. Throwing caution to the wind, he left the cover of the house and ran into the open, trying to stay low and hoping his dark clothes would keep him invisible. He was only 50 metres from the truck when Mr. Green suddenly stopped and turned round, as if he had sensed someone was there. There was nowhere for Alex to hide. He did the only thing he could and threw himself flat on the ground, burying his face in the grass. He counted slowly to 5, then looked up. Mr. Green was turning once again. A second visitor appeared. Nadia Mole. It seemed she would be driving. She muttered something as she climbed in the front. Mr. Green grunted and nodded. By the time Mr. Green had walked round to the passenger door, Alex was once again up and running. He reached the back of the truck just as it began to move. It was similar to the trucks he had seen at the SAS camp. It could have been an army surplus. The back was tall and square, covered with tarpaulin. Alex clambered on to the moving tailgate and threw himself in. He was only just in time. Even as he hit the floor, a car started up behind him, flooding the back of the truck with its headlamps. If he had waited even a few seconds more, he would have been seen. In all, a convoy of 5 vehicles left Sale Enterprises. The truck Alex was in was the last one, the last but one. As well as Mr. Green and Nadia Vole, at least a dozen uniformed guards were making the journey. But to where? Alex didn't dare look out the back, not with a car right behind him. He felt the truck slowed down as they reached the main gate, and then they were on the main road, driving rapidly uphill, away from the village. Alex felt the journey without seeing it. He was thrown across a metal floor as they sped around hairpin bends, and he only knew that they had left the main road when he suddenly found himself being bounced up and down. The truck was moving more slowly. He sensed that they were going downhill following a rough track, and now he could hear something, even over the noise of the engine. Waves. They had come down to the sea. The truck stopped. There was the opening and slamming of car doors, the scrunch of boots on rocks, low voices talking. Alex crouched down, afraid that one of the guards would grab the tarpaulin and discover him. But the voices faded, and he found himself once again alone. Cautiously, he slipped out the back. He was right. The convoy had parked on a deserted beach. Looking back, he could see a track leading down from the main road, which twisted up over the cliffs. Mr. Gwyn and the others had gathered beside an old stone jetty that stretched out into the black water. He was carrying a torch. Rick saw him swing it in an arc. Growing ever more curious, Alex crept forward and found a hiding place behind a cluster of boulders. It seemed they were waiting for a boat. He looked at his watch. It was exactly 2 o'clock. He almost wanted to laugh. If the men had flint-top pistols and horses, and they could have come straight out of a children's book. Smuggling on the Cornish coast. Could that be what this was about? Cocaine or marijuana coming in from the continent? Why else would they be here in the middle of the night? The question was answered a few seconds later. Alex stared, unable to believe quite what he was seeing. A submarine. It had emerged from the sea with the speed and impossibility of a huge stage illusion. One moment there was nothing, and there in front of him, ploughing through the sea towards the jetty, there it was, its engine making no sound, water streaking off its silver casing and churning white behind it. The submarine had no markings, but Alex thought he recognised the shape of the diving plane slashing horizontally through the coning tower and the shark's tail. Rudder at the back, a Chinese hand-class 404 SSN, nuclear-powered, armed, also with nuclear weapons. But what was it doing here, off the coast of Cornwall? What was going on? The tower opened and a man climbed out, stretching himself in the cold morning air. Even without the half moon, Alex would have recognised the sleek dancer's body and close-cropped hair of the man whose photograph he had seen only a few days ago. It was Yasin Gregorovich, the contract killer, the man who had murdered Ian Ryder. He was dressed in grey overalls and he was smiling. Yasin Gregorovich had supposedly met Sale in Cuba. Now here he was in Cornwall. So the two of them were working together. But why? Why would the Stormbreaker project need a man like him? Nadia Vol walked to the end of the jetty and Yasin climbed down to join her. They spoke for a few minutes, but even assuming they were speaking in English, there was no chance of being overheard. Meanwhile, the guards from Sale Enterprises had formed a line stretching back almost to the point where the vehicles were parked. Yasin gave an order, and as Alex watched from behind the rocks, a large metallic silver box with a vacuum seal appeared, held by unseen hands at the top of the submarine's tower. Yasin himself passed it down to the first of the guards, who then passed it back up the line. About 40 more boxes followed, one after the other. It took almost an hour to unload the submarine. The men handled the boxes carefully. They didn't want to break whatever was inside. By 3 o'clock, they were almost finished. The boxes were now being packed into the back of the truck that Alex had vacated. And that was when it happened. One of the men standing on the jetty dropped one of the boxes. He managed to catch it again at the last minute, but even so, it banged down heavily on the stone surface. Everyone stopped instantly. It was as if a switch had been thrown, and Alex could almost feel the raw fear in the air. Yasin was the first to recover. He darted forward along the jetty, moving like a cat, his feet making no sound. He reached the box and ran his hands over it, checking the seal. Then he nodded slowly. The metal wasn't even dented. With everyone else so still, Alex heard the exchange that followed. "It's okay, I'm sorry," the guard said. "It's not damaged, I won't do it again." "No, you won't," Yasin agreed and shot him. The bullet spat out of his hand, red in the darkness. It hit the man in the chest, propelling him backward in an awkward cartwheel. The man fell into the sea. For a few seconds he looked up at the moon, as if trying to admire it one last time. Then the black water folded over him. It took them another 20 minutes to load the truck. Yasin got into the front with Nadia, while Mr. Green went in one of the cars. Alex had no time to return. Alex had to time his return carefully. As the truck picked up speed, rumbling back up towards the road, he left the cover of the rocks, ran forward, and pulled himself in. There was hardly any room, but he managed to find a hole and squeeze himself into it. He ran a hand over one of the boxes. It was about the size of a tea chest, unmarked and cold to the touch. He tried to find a way to open it, but it was locked in a way he didn't understand. He looked back out of the truck. The beach and the jetty were already far below him. The submarine was pulling out to the sea. For a moment it was there, sleek and silver, gliding through the water. Then it had sunk over the surface, disappearing as quickly as a bad dream. And that's it for today. That is the end of the chapter. I wonder what's going to happen next as you read Death in the Long Grass. I wonder what that means. See you soon. Bye.